farming systems in agriculture. And in it, I'll be looking at the meaning of farming systems. I will also look at factors responsible for the choice of farming systems. Then I'll now look at the types of farming system alongside their advantages and their disadvantages. So let's sit back and be a part of the class as we listen carefully. So, what are farming systems? Farming systems refer to the ways, methods, or approaches adopted by various farmers in carrying out their farming operations or activities. That means the farming method the farmer is going to adopt, the ways, the approach he may use to carry out the planting, as practiced by different farmers. So this is referred to as farming system. Factors responsible for the choice of farming systems. The first factor I'm going to consider is availability of farmland. How much farmland does this farmer possess? Is there enough land to be used for these various farming systems? Or how large is your farmland? So depending on the size of the farmland you have as a farmer will also enable you to determine the farming system you are going to use. For example, if you have abundant land, you can decide to use bush fallowing, in which it involves a shifting cultivation whereby the farmer have to move from a piece of land to another after farming on that piece of land for so many years in order for the land to regain the lost nutrient. But for example, you don't have abundant land, how will you practice or use this particular method? So that is why we are saying the amount of land that is in your possession as a farmer will enable you to choose a particular farming method or system. The second factor I'm going to consider is economic factor. How much money do you have? If you have a lot of money, you can decide to practice, for example, mixed farming, whereby you have a land divided into probably two. You have animals on one side and you have crops on the other side. That is mixed farming. But in a situation where you don't have enough money to carry out this method, you can just practice arable crop production, whereby you have just one session of crop production. So the nature or the size of your farmland will enable you to determine the type of farming system as a farmer you are going to adopt. The third factor I'm going to consider is cultural factor. What is cultural factor? Cultural factor is that factor that is the practice of some certain persons within the locality or their locality, within an area. You agree with me that in the north, rearing of pig is almost like a forbidden thing over there because of their religious belief. You don't expect to go to the north states like Kaduna to start rearing pig, no. But all you see is pastoral farming, which in this sense could be cattle rearing, goat rearing, and even sheep and other ruminant animals, basically feeding on grasses. And that again is also depending on the availability of grasses over there. So similarly, you that is in the south, basically the farming nature there or system they also practice. That's why you see most of this poultry farming and all that over in the south. So whatever farming method or system that exists within a locality That will go a long way to determine what the people will also be adopting as a farming method or system. The next factor I want to is nature of the soil. How fertile is the soil? What is the suitability of that soil when you use it in crop production? If it's not fertile, how rich, how comfortable are you to buy fertilizers? So the nature of a soil will also determine the type of crops or other system of farming method you are going to adopt. You don't expect to plant on a soil that is not rich or is very poor in terms of nutrient. So that would have been converted to other use, maybe like rearing of animals. Or on the other hand, you have a soil that you know is very rich in terms of nutrient, and you are constructing a building on such land. That would be poor productivity. So you determine the nature of your soil, which again will enable you to choose the farming method or system you are going to adopt as a farmer. Yes, the next one I'm going to talk about is types of farming systems. Types of farming systems. Can you actually name the types of farming system you know? Let's see how many of them you can actually identify with. Yes. Yes, did I hear you say crop rotation? Crop rotation is not a farming system. That is a cropping system. So let's see the farming system we have. Pastoral farming, which is commonly practiced in the northern parts of Nigeria. Remember, we have mixed farming. We also have lay farming. Yes, this is shifting cultivation, which can also be called bush fallowing, and this method is actually very prominent in the southern part of Nigeria. Then we have tongia farming. So I'm going to explain each of them one after the other. So listen carefully. So let's start with tongia farming or tongia cultivation. Now, what is tongia farming? Tongia farming is a farming system whereby food crops are grown alongside with the forest or economic trees. What is the meaning of this? This is a system whereby the government will allocate lands after paying a token by the farmers to the government. Then this land is given to these farmers to plant their own arable crops or food crops such as maize or yam. But they will be asked to plant economic trees such as uruko, obeche, mahogany, and so on the same land after harvesting their farm produce. In other words, the arable crop production is meant for the farmers, while the economic trees is for the government. But it is the government that actually owns this land. So that is why you sometimes hear government reserved lands. I'm not talking of GRA now, but there are land that are meant for farming. And these are owned by the government, given to farmers to actually carry out their farming activities. So they pay a little money or a token to the government while they are issued the various lands for farming purposes. So you agree with me that the advantage of this system is that it is providing income to the farmers, while the farmers will also benefit from such land by deriving their food crops of production from such. Then again, the trees are used for economic purposes, like you have electric poles, even most of the trees they use. I hope you also remember that you get exercise books from wood pulp. So these are wood pulp are gotten from timber and this is where you also get the timber from such a land. So all these provide economic functions. Then remember that from timber you can also have your furniture making, the doors and the windows and all that. So all these are the gain of tongue farming system. However, it also has its own disadvantages, because if they have been planted and you are cutting them down, which we call deforestation, that will lead to destruction of natural forests. Then remember, because they are trees, the farmers will be advised not to plant permanent crops. So in other words, the farmers cannot plant permanent crops in such land, because such land is not their own, it is owned by the government. So they can plant economic trees for the government and not for the farmers. The farmers can only plant arable crop production. So let's look at other methods. The next method I want to discuss in detail is pastoral farming. What is pastoral farming? Pastoral farming of farm animals that feed on forage crops. Yes, do you still remember what are forage crops? Forage crops are leguminous crops alongside or together with grasses. That is to say, grasses, which are also known as pastures, together with leguminous crops are called forage crops. That means leguminous crops are those plants that are capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, while other crops or other plants depend on the nitrogen in the soil. Leguminous crops are capable of converting atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, so they are useful plants. So they help to supply nutrients to the soil, and not only that, animals feed on such plants. Pastoral farming, through the help of forage crops, provide protein and enough feed to the animals while they feed on the crops or grasses. Remember, pastoral farming is divided into two. We have pastoral herding, and the other is pastoral ranching. Pastoral ranching is when the animals are feeding on grasses available on a particular area. That is to say, they don't move beyond that location. That's a range. You just have a portion of a land and there are grasses in there. Then these animals are introduced to feed on these grasses. That's pastoral ranching. And sometimes this ranch or range can be divided into portions known as paddocking, whereby you systematically introduce the animal from one portion to the other to increase or facilitate the growth of grasses. So my dear students, we have come to the end of part 1 of this topic, as I hope to continue with part 2 next week. So prepare yourself with enough questions, do the quiz and assignments, and don't hesitate to ask questions. See you in class. Bye.